Hey, all, today we are going to apply and use what we know about graphs of lines and graphing lines and use them to solve some practical problems or use them in real life scenarios. So I want you to pause here, take a second and read this problem, and then we'll discuss how we can answer it. So we are talking about the college basketball tournament where we rank teams from 1 through 16 and then they play games. And so we are given some ranks and then we're giving some percent chance to win their first game. We want to know the rate which the percent of winning decreases as the rank increases. And so a rate related to what we've been talking about in graphing lines is the slope. Slope is a rate. It tells us how slanty a line is. It also tells us how sort of fast it goes up to the right or how fast it goes down to the right. And so here we have some x's and y's, whether we know it or not. So we have a ranking, and the ranking is going to tell us, is going to determine how likely we are to win. So a team that's ranked higher is better. So our rankings are x's, and our percent chance of winning are y's. And when we want to find a rate, what we're really asking for is if we were to graph a line for this scenario, what would the slope be? And so this is a lot of information that could maybe be scary or confusing, but what we're really just doing is a slope problem. So we have two x's and two y's, and so we can find the slope of this line, which will give us a rate that we're decreasing as our rank increases. So I'm going to go to Desmos, and remember we can find the slope between 2 points by using a table. And so my 10th rank is 39.2%, and my 5th rank is 73.6%. And just so you know, in this scenario, the lower the number, the higher the rank. It's a little backwards, I suppose. And so we can find the slope. We can subtract the y's. We always want to subtract the y's. And we should always write slope is m. We're going to subtract the y's. And then on the bottom, we're going to subtract the x's. And so we should do 39.2 minus 73.6, and then 10 minus 5. And we have a slope of negative 34.4 over 5. And that gives us a decimal. We can try and convert it to a fraction. It doesn't matter which one we use. In this instance, we might want to use the decimal, negative 6.88. So we have a negative slope, a negative rate. And so if we were to graph a line here, it should go down to the right. And so as you can see, I've just added some more information about this problem. We're talking about the same problem. Here is the equation of the line that represents this problem. And as you can see, it's the same slope that we just calculated, negative 6.88. And then we have this other value that is our y-intercept. That's where our line would cross the y-axis. And so we can interpret these things in the context of our problem. We are talking about basketball teams' ranks and their likelihood or their probability of winning a game in this tournament. And so when we have a y-intercept, let me graph that quick, this line. So I've graphed a line. When we have a y-intercept, the place where it crosses the y-axis, which is right there, the x value is 0. In this scenario, we're being told that x is the rank. And so if we want to interpret or explain what the y-intercept means, um, what it means is if we have a rank of 0, then we would expect to have a 108% probability of winning the game. So you might say, well, Mr. Pickard, you're not going to be ranked 0. You can be ranked 1, but not 0. Probability, you can't have a 108% chance of winning. But that's okay. But that's what it would mean. That's how we can interpret this intercept. Slope, since we're decreasing, means that every time we increase the number of our rank, so we go from 10 to 11 or 11 to 12 or 12 to 13, every time we increase our rank number, the number that we would plug in for x, every time that number goes up, our percentage of winning goes down. That's what the minus means, 6.88%. So as our rank goes up, as our x value goes up by 1, then our percentage chance of winning goes down by 6.88. And then so every time we add another number to x, our probability is going to go down by 6.88%. And so if we wanted to find the probability of an 8th ranked team, I have this graphed already. Rank is x, so I can just tell the calculator x equals 8. And you can see I have this other line graphed, and I can click where those two lines intersect. You can see my x value is 8. That's my ranking. The y value represents our probability of winning. So our probability of winning is 52.96%. So let me do another one like that. I would like you to pause the video, and I would like you to read this problem. Please don't get hung up on what is GDP or what some of these words are. We'll discuss in a minute. So just give this a read. So we don't really have to understand what GDP is or what corruption measure is to answer the question. We can just use what we know about lines. And so when we want to know what the y-intercept of this line is, we have this equation up here. X is the corruption and Y is the GDP. Again, we don't need to know what that means. We'll just use the words. So the y-intercept is the place where X is 0. And so in this case, X is corruption, so that means corruption is 0. And so our y-intercept of minus 5530 means that when we have corruption equal to 0, our GDP is negative 5530. It makes no difference if we know what those things mean, but we can use the information we have and we can interpret it this way. We're just going to use the words they give us. And who cares if we know what GDP is? I don't think I can explain it. But GDP is Y. And so when X is 0, when our corruption is 0, GDP is negative 5530. Our slope is 419. X is corruption. Y is GDP. So we have a positive slope. So that means every time we change X by 1, so every time X we add 1 corruption value, our GDP is going to go up by 419. So when we increase our corruption by 1, so these are measurements. When we increase our corruption measurement by 1, that X value, when we increase it by 1, then we are also going to be increasing, since this is a positive slope, a positive rate, we are going to also be increasing our GDP by 419. And lastly, we want to find the GDP for a country with a corruption measure of 10. So I have my line graphed. It looks like it's a straight line, but it's just because our numbers are so big that we can't see how slanted it is. But I can tell it that X equals 10. Corruption measure is our our x value, and so we can find the point where x equals 10 crosses our line. If I just click this box where I say x equals 10, you can see a point appears. And we're getting 0, which is probably because it's so very small. So maybe this was not the best problem, or maybe I can't see the point. I'm going to pause and find it. So because my numbers are so big, I can't see the place visually where this crosses, but we have another way to figure out what y is when we plug in 10. We can go back to what we did at the beginning of the year. I'm going to change this to capital X equals 10. And I'm going to change this to just the right side of my equation. And I'm going to change my X to a capital again. And I can see that my answer is negative 1340. So even though I couldn't see it because the numbers were so big, I could go then just plug 10 in for X, but I have to use capital letters. So negative 1340. Again, if you need help ever, so if that was a little bit confusing, I can understand. Just make sure you call me over and ask me for help, and we could look at it together. So like I just said, please, 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 if you need help with this, if you need some clarification, or if I can say something in a different way to you, please ask. Please stick around and answer the questions at the end. Take your time on these. Ask me for help. Good luck.